Imagine you're waiting to board a flight. You grab a $6 coffee, buy a magazine, pay for parking, and pick up a last-minute snack. It feels like ordinary travel. But every purchase quietly feeds one of the most sophisticated business models in the world. Most travelers assume airports make their money from airplanes. Bigger planes, more flights, higher profits. That sounds logical, yet it misses the real story. Many airports earn enormous revenue from everything happening around the flight rather than the flight itself. Consider two airports handling exactly the same number of passengers each year. One consistently generates strong profits while the other struggles to stay financially healthy. The difference is not always the runway, the terminal, or even the airlines. Often it comes down to how effectively each airport turns traveler movement into profitable business activity. That $6 coffee rarely benefits only the cafe. The airport may collect rent, receive a percentage of sales, charge concession fees, and increase the value of its retail space. Multiply that by millions of passengers, then add parking, advertising, restaurants, hotels, rental cars, cargo facilities, and office leases. Suddenly, the airport starts looking less like a transportation hub and more like a carefully designed commercial ecosystem. Here's the surprising twist. Airplanes attract people, but people create spending. Every traveler walking through security represents dozens of potential transactions before ever reaching the departure gate. The runway brings customers through the door, yet the surrounding businesses quietly transform those visitors into long-term revenue. Once you recognize that simple shift, every airport begins to look completely different. The aircraft may capture your attention, but they are only part of the story. The biggest question isn't how airplanes make airports rich. It's why the land beneath your feet may be the most valuable asset of all. In the next few minutes, we'll follow the money from the parking entrance to the departure gate, uncover every major revenue stream, and reveal why investors sometimes pay billions for airports that many passengers simply walk through without ever noticing the extraordinary economics operating beneath every boarding pass they hold. When most people picture an airport, they imagine airplanes taking off, passengers rushing through terminals, and air traffic controllers guiding flights. Those activities are certainly essential, but they are not what makes many airports financially powerful. Behind the scenes, the airport is functioning like a massive real estate company that just happens to have runways attached. Think about the amount of land a major airport controls. It isn't just the terminal building. There are parking garages, hotels, office complexes, cargo warehouses, maintenance facilities, rental car centers, restaurants, shopping areas, fuel storage, logistics hubs, and undeveloped land reserved for future expansion. Every square foot represents an opportunity to generate income. Walk through any large international airport and notice what surrounds you. Coffee shops compete for prime locations. Luxury brands pay premium rents to operate duty-free stores. Fast food chains, bookstores, pharmacies, lounges, currency exchange counters, and convenience stores all pay for the privilege of serving millions of travelers. The airport doesn't need to sell coffee or designer handbags itself. It earns money by leasing valuable space to businesses that do. Now compare two retail spaces inside the same terminal. One sits empty behind a locked security gate. The other is occupied by a luxury duty-free boutique serving thousands of international travelers every day. The physical space may be nearly identical, yet the revenue potential is dramatically different. The airport understands that location is an asset, and the busiest corners command the highest prices. This philosophy extends far beyond shopping. Hotels pay to operate near terminals because travelers value convenience. Cargo companies lease enormous facilities because airports connect them to global trade routes. Airlines rent gates, offices, maintenance hangars, and operational space. Even billboards, digital displays, and sponsorship agreements transform ordinary walls into profitable advertising assets. In many ways, a successful airport resembles a small city. It has transportation networks, commercial districts, hospitality services, logistics centers, utilities, security, and constant economic activity. The difference is that nearly everyone passing through is already prepared to spend money, whether on food, parking, transportation, or last-minute purchases before boarding. That is why airport executives pay close attention to passenger flow. They study how people move through terminals, where they stop, how long they wait, and which locations attract the highest spending. Better layouts don't simply improve convenience. They increase revenue by placing businesses where customers naturally gather. Once you begin viewing airports through the lens of commercial real estate, the business model starts making much more sense. But land alone doesn't explain everything. The next piece of the puzzle is understanding exactly how airports turn both airplanes and passengers into multiple streams of predictable, long-term income. To understand why airports can become extraordinary businesses, you need to separate their income into two completely different categories. The first comes directly from aviation. The second comes from everything happening around aviation. Surprisingly, the second category is becoming more important every year. Aviation revenue is the money airports earn because airplanes use their infrastructure. Every time an aircraft lands, the airline typically pays a landing fee. Airlines also pay for terminal space, passenger boarding gates, aircraft parking, baggage handling facilities, and various operational services that keep flights moving safely and efficiently. On top of that, many airports collect passenger service charges that help fund maintenance, expansion, and future improvements. These revenue streams are stable, but they have limits. Airports cannot simply double landing fees without risking airlines moving flights elsewhere. Pricing is often influenced by competition, regulations, and long-term agreements with carriers. That means aviation income grows steadily, but rarely explosively. Now comes the part most travelers never think about. Non-aviation revenue includes parking garages, restaurants, cafes, duty-free stores, advertising, hotels, rental cars, office leases, cargo warehouses, premium lounges, and commercial property surrounding the airport. Every traveler walking through the terminal becomes a potential customer for dozens of independent businesses, all paying the airport in different ways. Imagine two passengers boarding identical flights. One walks straight to the gate without spending anything. The other parks their car, buys breakfast, shops at a duty-free store, upgrades to an airport lounge, and rents a car after landing. The airplane generates the same aviation revenue from both travelers, but the second passenger produces significantly more non-aviation income. This explains why airports invest heavily in retail design. They carefully position shops where passengers naturally slow down. They create comfortable waiting areas near restaurants. They improve signs that guide people toward shopping zones. Every design choice aims to increase spending without making travelers feel pressured. Many of the world's most successful airports now generate more than half of their total revenue from non-aviation activities. That statistic surprises people because airplanes dominate the skyline, yet passengers quietly drive much of the profit. The lesson is simple. Airplanes bring customers, but customers create business opportunities. Without flights, travelers never arrive. Without travelers, stores, restaurants, hotels, and parking facilities lose their purpose. The two systems depend on each other, but they do not contribute equally to profitability. Understanding this balance also explains why airports spend billions improving passenger experiences. Faster security, cleaner terminals, better restaurants, attractive shopping, and convenient parking are not just customer service upgrades. They are investments designed to increase spending, strengthen long-term revenue, and make every traveler more valuable. But if airports earn money from so many different sources, another fascinating question appears. Why do airlines, the very businesses bringing customers through the doors, often possess enough negotiating power to influence airport decisions in ways that seem completely unexpected? At first glance, it seems obvious who holds the power. Airlines bring passengers. Without flights, terminals would sit empty, shops would close, and parking lots would remain vacant. That makes it easy to assume airports must always give airlines whatever they want. The real relationship is much more balanced, and in some situations, the airport actually has the stronger position. Imagine a small regional airport served by only one major airline. If that airline threatens to cancel its routes, the consequences could be severe. Passenger traffic would collapse, local businesses would suffer, and airport revenue could decline dramatically. To avoid that outcome, the airport may reduce landing fees, offer marketing support, or provide temporary incentives to keep the airline operating. Now compare that with one of the world's busiest international hubs. Hundreds of flights arrive and depart every day. Multiple airlines compete for gates, takeoff slots, and terminal space. If one airline decides to leave, another carrier may eagerly expand to fill the gap. Suddenly, the balance of power shifts. Instead of negotiating from a position of weakness, the airport can remain selective because demand for access exceeds available capacity. Hub airports become especially valuable because they connect passengers to dozens or even hundreds of destinations. Airlines want access to those networks because they generate connecting traffic and strengthen their own competitive position. That means both sides need each other, but not always equally. This creates fascinating negotiations behind closed doors. Airlines want lower fees, better gate locations, and more favorable operating conditions. Airports want long-term commitments, reliable passenger growth, and stable revenue. The final agreement often reflects local competition, regional demand, and future expansion plans rather than simple bargaining. Many travelers never realize that airports constantly compete with nearby airports for airlines, especially in large metropolitan regions. Lower costs, better facilities, and stronger passenger demand can influence where new routes are launched. At the same time, airlines also compete fiercely for valuable gates at popular airports because those locations are difficult to replace. The relationship is less like a customer buying a service and more like two major businesses negotiating a partnership. Each depends on the other, yet each tries to maximize its own long-term interests. That raises an even bigger question. If airports earn income from airlines, passengers, parking, retail, hotels, and commercial property, why do some still struggle financially year after year? The answer lies not in their revenue, but in the enormous costs required to build, operate, maintain, and continually modernize one of the world's most expensive pieces of infrastructure. From the outside, a busy airport looks like a machine that prints money. Millions of passengers pass through its terminals every year, airplanes land every few minutes, and restaurants remain packed from morning until night. It's easy to assume that every airport must be enormously profitable. Yet behind that activity lies one of the most expensive operating environments in the world. Start with the runways. They are not ordinary roads. Every landing by a fully loaded aircraft places tremendous stress on the pavement. Runways must be inspected constantly, repaired regularly, and completely resurfaced after years of heavy use. A single major rehabilitation project can cost tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on the airport size. Then come the terminals themselves. Heating, air conditioning, electricity, elevators, escalators, baggage systems, digital displays, security equipment, and water systems all operate around the clock. Unlike many businesses that close overnight, airports function almost continuously, meaning utility bills alone can reach astonishing levels. Security is another enormous expense. Airports must invest in screening equipment, surveillance systems, emergency response teams, fire and rescue services, perimeter protection, cybersecurity, and compliance with constantly evolving aviation regulations. These costs continue whether passenger numbers are high or low. Weather creates another challenge. In colder climates, airports spend millions removing snow and ice from runways. In hotter regions, extreme temperatures increase maintenance requirements for both pavement and equipment. Nature doesn't pause operations, so airports must be prepared for almost every scenario. Expansion projects are even more expensive. Imagine adding a new terminal capable of serving 10 million additional passengers each year. The project may require new gates, larger parking facilities, expanded road access, upgraded utilities, and additional baggage systems. Financing these developments often means borrowing billions of dollars that must be repaid over decades. That debt becomes another major cost. Even successful airports may spend substantial amounts every year simply paying interest and principal on previous construction projects. A growing airport can therefore appear extremely busy while still generating modest profits because so much revenue is committed to long-term obligations. This explains why passenger numbers alone never tell the full financial story. Two airports handling identical traffic may produce completely different financial results depending on construction debt, operating efficiency, maintenance costs, and commercial revenue. Understanding these hidden expenses changes the way we think about airport ownership. Building an airport requires enormous capital. Operating one demands constant investment, and expanding one involves long-term financial risk. So why do pension funds, infrastructure companies, and global investors still compete to buy airport ownership stakes? The answer reveals why airports remain some of the most sought-after infrastructure assets in the world. Given everything you've seen, it might seem surprising that investors actively compete to own airports. After all, they require enormous capital, constant maintenance, complex regulation, and years of planning. Yet some of the world's largest pension funds, infrastructure firms, and sovereign investors consider airports among the most attractive long-term assets. The reason is predictability. People may reduce travel during recessions, but over long periods, air travel has generally expanded alongside population growth, tourism, business, and global trade. Airports with strong locations often benefit from decades of steady demand. Unlike many businesses, airports rarely face direct competition next door. Building a new international airport requires massive investment, government approvals, environmental reviews, and years of construction. Those barriers protect existing airports from new rivals, allowing successful operators to generate relatively dependable cash flow. Another attraction is inflation protection. As prices rise across the economy, airports can often adjust parking fees, commercial rents, advertising contracts, and certain passenger charges over time. That ability helps preserve purchasing power for long-term investors seeking stable returns rather than explosive growth. Imagine choosing between buying a shopping mall and buying an airport. Both rely on people visiting physical locations, but airports perform an additional role. They connect regions, support trade, enable tourism, and serve as critical transportation infrastructure. Replacing a struggling shopping mall is possible. Replacing a major airport is far more difficult. Of course, airports are not risk-free investments. The pandemic demonstrated how quickly passenger traffic can collapse. Travel restrictions, geopolitical tensions, economic downturns, fuel price shocks, and changing airline strategies can all reduce revenue. Investors understand these risks, which is why they evaluate airports over decades instead of quarters. That long-term perspective explains why airport ownership remains so appealing. Investors are not simply buying runways or terminals. They are investing in infrastructure that supports entire economies, generates multiple revenue streams, and benefits from enduring demand. Understanding that broader role naturally leads to an even bigger question. How do airports influence the economic future of the cities and countries they serve? That broader impact extends far beyond travelers, shaping employment, investment, innovation, regional competitiveness. Together tomorrow, an airport does far more than move passengers from one destination to another. It acts as an economic gateway that connects an entire region to the rest of the world. Every arriving flight brings tourists, business travelers, investors, skilled workers, and opportunities that ripple through the local economy. Jobs are the most visible effect. Airports employ thousands of people directly, from pilots and baggage handlers to engineers, security officers, retailers, hotel staff, and maintenance crews. Beyond the airport itself, nearby businesses benefit from the constant flow of visitors and cargo. Trade also depends heavily on airports. High-value goods such as electronics, pharmaceuticals, fresh seafood, and medical equipment often travel by air because speed matters. Efficient airports allow companies to reach global customers faster, making the surrounding region more attractive for manufacturers and international businesses. The impact extends into real estate as well. Hotels, conference centers, warehouses, logistics parks, office developments, and residential communities frequently grow around successful airports. Better air connections can increase investment, raise property values, and encourage entirely new industries to emerge. This is why governments and investors view airports as strategic infrastructure rather than simple transportation facilities. A well-managed airport supports tourism, strengthens business activity, expands trade, creates employment, and attracts long-term investment across an entire region. In the end, Owning an airport is about much more than controlling a runway. It means owning the front door to a regional economy, where every flight has the potential to generate opportunities far beyond the terminal itself. Think back to the traveler who bought a $6 coffee before boarding. At first, it seemed like an ordinary purchase. Now you know it was just one small transaction inside a vast economic ecosystem. Parking fees, restaurant sales, duty-free shopping, hotel bookings, cargo operations, advertising, property leases, and landing charges all combine to create a business far more sophisticated than most people ever imagine. That is the real economics of owning an airport. Airplanes bring people, but people generate opportunity. Every passenger supports dozens of businesses, and every business contributes to an infrastructure asset designed to produce value for decades. The next time you walk through an airport, don't just look at the aircraft waiting outside the window. Look at everything happening around you. You're not simply passing through a transportation hub. You're walking through one of the world's most valuable and carefully engineered infrastructure businesses, where nearly every step creates economic value.